I read this text from John 21, let me fill you in a little bit on the background of what brought this story. It's a short story about a fishing trip. I want to tell you what brought it to this place in the story. The disciples, 12 of them, had forsaken everything to follow Jesus. They had been following him for 3.5 years. And they had given up all. Homes, families, professions, jobs, everything. They'd forsaken it all to follow Jesus because they looked to him to be the Messiah. Like Moses delivered Israel out of Egyptian bondage, they were looking to him to deliver them out of Roman bondage and set up a new kingdom, a new empire. The Davidic throne would be in place again. So that's what their hopes were. Now then, they had seen Jesus die. He had been crucified. He was dead. They saw him placed in the tomb, and the tomb was sealed. Their life was totally destroyed. You talk about a tornado across town. They feel like they had been wiped out, everything. They were depressed. They were discouraged. They were distressed. They did not know what to do. So, the evening before, they saw the empty tomb. So something had happened. They didn't know whether the body had been stolen or what. That evening, they were in an upper room behind a locked door. Just the disciples. Jesus appears. They are terrified. They think it's a spirit. So he invites them to come and handle me, come and touch me. Feel the prints in my hand. Thrust your hand into my side. And he talks with them a little while, and he's gone. Now then, they are confused. They don't know what's going on. And that brings us to the story here, because he's going to appear to them again. He's going to give them more instructions. But right now, you have to understand the state of mind that they're in. They are depressed. They're down. They're ready to quit, to give up. Their hope is gone. Their dream is gone. They have nothing left. And it comes to this story. Now, here's who was there. It was Simon Peter and Thomas. That's 2. Nathaniel, that's 3. The sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, that's 5. And 2 other disciples. I'm in verse 2, I'm sorry. John 21, verse 2. So there's 7 of them all total. Now there's only 11 disciples because Judas had already hanged himself. So there's 11. 7 out of 11 are going to make this decision. So Simon Peter says, I'm going fishing. Now, he didn't say, I'm just going to go on a little afternoon fishing trip, pleasure trip. These were fishermen by trade. He said, I'm going back into the fishing business. There's nothing left for us here. I'm going to go back to fishing to make a living. All of these said, well, we'll go with you. 7 of them go fishing. Back in the fishing business. They go out, they fish all night, and they caught nothing. How many have ever been in the caught nothing business? I hate that caught nothing business. But in the morning, they fish at night. In the morning, Jesus stood on the shore. Now, they were pretty close in. But the disciples, look at this, I'm in verse 4. The disciples knew not that it was Jesus. Now, that's important. They didn't recognize him. And Jesus said to them, now King James says children, but what he said was, sirs, have you any meat? He said, did you catch anything? You caught any fish? They said, no. Fished all night. We haven't caught a fish all night. And he said, well, cast your net on the right side of the ship and you shall find. They cast the net. The net was so full they could not pull it and load it onto the boat. They had to drag it into the shore. Now that's where the story is. This is more than just another fish story. These boys were professional fishermen. They fished all night and they caught nothing. Their nets were empty. Their nets were empty. That's the title. In the morning, Jesus shows up. Did you catch anything? Every fisherman that's ever fished has asked and been asked this question. Did you catch anything? Most of the time my answer is no. Haven't caught a thing. He said, cast your net on the right side. Walk to the other side of the boat. Now this was not a big ship. This is a fishing boat. Walk across the boat and let your net down. Now here's professional fishermen and some guy standing on the shore that they don't know who it is, and he's telling them, do something different than what you've been doing. Okay. They walk across the boat, let their net down, and the net is full. It's so full they can't even pull the fish onto the boat. Now, let me ask you a question. How long does it take God to turn an empty net into a full net? How long does it take God to turn defeat into victory? How long does it take God to turn sickness into health? Failure to success? Poverty to prosperity? Remember Joseph in prison in Egypt? And one whisper from the Holy Ghost took him from prison to prime minister. How long does it take for God to turn an empty net into a full net? Now these boys were not lazy. They had worked. They caught nothing. And sometimes I don't care how hard you work. I don't care how much faith you have, how good your confession may be. The course of life will acquaint you with some empty nets. I don't care who you are. Every person in this room has had some disappointments and some failures and had some empty nets in your life. I don't care who you are. An empty net can be anything. It can be a divorce, death of a loved one, loss of a job, the betrayal of a friend. An empty net can be maybe when you have failed to live up to your own standards. Maybe you've let yourself down. You've let your family down. You've let God down. But you find yourself dragging an empty net. Empty net can be anything that destroys your confidence in God, in people, or in yourself. Now, some of you have worked, you have prayed, you have been faithful, you've done everything you know to do, but you have had one empty net after another. You feel crushed, drained, empty, and like the disciples, you feel depressed, discouraged, distressed. I want you to know, Jesus always shows up where there's an empty net. He always shows up where there's a need. They had fished all night and caught nothing. And in the morning, Jesus shows up. Now it's interesting. We all know the darkest hour is just before the dawn. The darkest moment when you feel the most hopeless and helpless. That's when you can look for that ray of light at the end of the tunnel. Jesus shows up and they didn't recognize him. How could they not recognize a man that they had been with every day for 3.5 years? They didn't recognize him because they weren't looking for him. I want that to soak in. He was dead. How's he going to show up? They didn't recognize him because they were not looking for him. Now, if you've been pulling up some empty nets, I believe Jesus is hanging around somewhere. You've got to look for him. You've got to look for him. He may not appear the way you think he's going to appear, but you got to be looking for him. An empty net may mean that he's trying to get your attention. So how many know sometimes God needs to get our attention? And he causes an empty net, so hey, you're not paying attention. Better pay attention. Things going to get worse if you don't pay attention. He has to get our attention. But I don't care how empty your net may be, Jesus is here. And I believe there can be some full nets today. That's God's message. There can be some full nets. It's not that far to the other side of the boat. It's not that far from an empty net to a full net. It's not that far from sickness to health. How many have been battling some sickness? Man, see, something hit me this week. I mean, it just knocked me flat on my back. Just now beginning to get over it. But it's not that far from sickness to health. It's not that far from failure to success, poverty to prosperity. Some of you came here today dragging an empty net behind you. In fact, some of you have dragged that empty net around so long it's afraid it couldn't hold a fish if you got one in it. I believe you can leave here today with a full net. I believe you can leave here today with a whole new outlook, uplook, a whole new hope in your life, because it's not that far from where you are to the miracle that you need to take you where you need to be. Some of you going through some tough times. I know that. You're tired. Joplin's going through some tough times. Joplin's been hit hard. 4-state area's been hit hard. Some of you going through some tough times. Some of you don't have jobs. Some of you, the guy just told me today, just found out that his job that he's been on is no longer going to exist. I told him, good. Now you can find you a good paying job. Some of you tired. You're worn out. You're beginning to wonder if it's even worthwhile to make the effort anymore. I want you to get this. Now, I'm going to preach long today. I don't feel like it. But it's not that far to my health. I know where it is. But I want you to know that. I want you to get this. The devil wants you so discouraged that you're ready to quit. Because he wants to paralyze your progress. Think about it. He wants you to give up, to quit. Because he knows that when you cry out to God, you activate God's power. You can activate God's power. He wants you to the point where you're so discouraged and paralyzed that you no longer even want to make the effort. You're ready to quit. Now get this. You want to know what gets God going? How would you like to have God going for you? God gets going when you get going. Stay with me. God gets going when you get going. Listen to what he said. Draw nigh to me, I'll draw nigh to you. In the day that you seek me, you'll find me. Ask, and you shall receive. Seek, you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened. Turn to me. I'll turn to you. You see, that's why the devil wants you paralyzed, ready to give up, so discouraged that you can see no light at the end of the tunnel. Now, you could be like the guy who said, I finally saw a light at the end of the tunnel, and it was a freight train coming at me. So, you have to be careful about them lights coming at you. I'm just saying, if the devil can get you paralyzed and ready to quit, then you won't cry out to God. And God will not, hear me, God will not turn to you until you turn to Him. Sorry, that's just the way He is. He's God. Better take Him like He is. I want you to say something with me. Say, I can activate God's power. Now think about what you're saying. I want you to say it again. I can activate God's power. No one else can do it for you. But you can. You can activate God's power. I want you to say something else. I can go from an empty net to a full net. I can go from an empty net to a full net. It's not that far. It's not that far. To the other side of the boat. To the other side of the boat. The first thing Jesus did when He showed up, He asked them a question. He wanted to know what their evaluation of the situation was. He said, caught any fish? They said, no, we haven't caught. We've fished all night, haven't caught anything. Now, I'm going to contradict what some of you have been taught. I hope I have never taught this. If I have, forgive me. Some of you have been taught. Now, let me just put it in the other direction. Faith is not being ignorant of the problem. Faith is not denying that the problem exists. Faith takes an honest evaluation of the situation. Now, I've heard some so-called faith teachers saying, well, you just ignore the problem, just confess that it's not there. Now, that's a bunch of garbage. If I'm sick, I want everybody around me to know I'm sick. And I'm going to inform God I'm sick. I'm not going to ignore the problem and deny that it exists. I'm going to recognize the situation. That's all I'm saying. Recognize your situation. If you cannot identify your problem, you cannot solve your problem. I'm going to calm down. When you read the rest of the story, you'll find that they not only had their nets full. Now, do you know what a full net would mean? A net so full that they couldn't load it on the boat? Do you know what that meant to them in financial terms? That meant they had a bunch of money, honey. They were well off. It didn't take many fish to make a good living. They had enough to make them a living for a while. Now, you read the rest of the story, you'll find they not only had their nets full, but when they got to the shore, Jesus already had breakfast ready for them. They found He had fish cooking on the fire. Where did He get His fish? What kind of deal is this? I have to work hard for every little old scale I catch. He had it already, breakfast ready for them. Now, when they got there, Jesus did not give them a critique of why they had empty nets. He did not teach them a seminar on how to catch fish. In fact, he did not waste 1 minute explaining the empty net. Now, if you really want to get hung up in life, I mean hung up and paralyzed, you just start trying to explain the empty nets of your life. And you will never have a full net. I have known people, they make a bad investment. They loan somebody the money, they won't pay it back. Something happens, and they spend the rest of their life trying to figure out how to get that money back. It's gone. Let it go. It's an empty net. Go figure out how to make some more money so you can make another investment. Don't spend your time trying to figure out why you had an empty net. And I know some people spend their whole life trying to explain an empty net experience. Why did this happen to me? Why did my job fail? Why did my marriage go bad? What did I do wrong? Oh, why did this happen to me? Every time you see them, it's the same thing. What difference does it make? It's yesterday's garbage. Some people spend their whole life, they got a life full of garbage. They spend a whole life dragging these garbage cans and garbage bags around behind them. And they take it from one relationship to the next one and wonder why that relationship won't work. Well, cut them garbage bags off. They're empty nets. Let them go. It doesn't make any difference because there's nothing you can do about it. It was yesterday. Put a period on yesterday's empty nets. This is a new day. Well, hallelujah. Two of us are in agreement. The rest of you I'm seriously concerned about. Get a grunt out of a hog if you take him a slop bucket. I'm not even getting a grunt. You act like you're paralyzed, you know. Wow. Huh. So what do? Apostle Paul said it this way: forgetting those things which are behind, you press towards the mark. Press towards your goal. Find you a goal, something to look forward to. Quit trying to look backwards. Press towards where you want to go. He said, I'm pressing towards the mark of the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. That's what I'm doing. But you've got to have a goal. You've got to have a dream. You've got to have a plan. You've got to have a vision. And the problem with most, I'll phrase this properly. Problem with most of the church world today, they have no vision. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no vision, the people are scattered. Now, if you really want to know what it says, see, the King James smoothed out some rough edges in the real Bible. You know that? He said, where there is no vision, the people are scattered like wild asses. They're just gone. You know what's happening in most churches today? People are scattering. They're just scattered. Boom, 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 boom. Because there's no vision. Listen, you better have you a vision. You better have you a plan. If you don't, you need to get on your knees and get you a plan and a direction for your life. No one can give that to you. That's something that's got to come from here. Am I making any sense at all? All right. Don't think about the empty nets. There's nothing you can do about it. So what do? Whatsoever things are good, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are of a good report, think on these things. That's what Paul said, the Apostle Paul. Think on these things. Don't spend your time trying to figure out why you got sick. Concentrate on getting well. Don't spend your time trying to figure out why your marriage went bad. Spend your time making your marriage better. You know, when you were dating, you put forth a lot of effort and a lot of time to win that person that you loved. You invested yourself in anything you could to make that person happy, to let them know how much you loved them. Why don't you start putting that effort into your marriage right now? Why don't you just put the effort into loving each other again? See, people mistake the fact, love is not an emotion. I'm sorry. Lust is an emotion. Love is an act of the will. It's something you choose to do. Now, lust will stir the hormones. Oh, you were not expecting me to go there, were you? Some of you obviously need your hormones stirred in your marriage. Why don't you invest yourself in making that person fall in love with you again? I better leave that alone. That may be another day. Don't spend your time dwelling on the problem. The more you talk about the problem, the bigger it grows. You want to turn a small problem into a monster. You just keep talking about it. Come on. The more you stir a stink, the worse it stinks. Come on. All right, I'm trying to find a way to quit here. God sometimes changes methods in the way He deals with us in meeting our needs. Let me give you a prime example, and we'll probably talk about this next week. I'm not sure yet, but probably. Elijah had it made. There was a drought in the land. Everybody was going through some tough times. You talk about tough times. It hadn't rained for 3 years. They were hurting, starving. And Elijah had it made. He was hiding in the mountains. Every morning the ravens would bring him food. Every night the ravens would bring him food. He was drinking from a brook. One day he gets up and the ravens don't show up. He said, whoa. And the brook dried up. He said, double woe. Woe is me, I'm woe, woe, woe. He said, I better change what I'm doing here. See, the problem was there was a widow woman that needed a miracle in her life. And God had to change. You'll get what I'm saying in just a minute. God had to change His method of meeting Elijah's need so that Elijah would go and meet the widow woman's need. Now, we do not know the ramifications and all of the complex chain of events that God sometimes has to set in motion in order for us to have our needs met. You see, there may be some things that need to be done along the way. He may have to stop the ravens from bringing you food. He may have to dry up the brook. He may have to make you lose your job so you can get a better job. He may have to change His method of meeting your needs. And the fact is, you're not smart enough to figure out what God's doing. But you can learn to trust Him to do it.
There you go. Amen.
He may have to change His methods. Don't waste your time trying to figure God out. You're not capable. All I can say is, let God be God. Let God be God. And if God be for us, who can be against us? Amen. Jesus did not spend 1 second explaining why they hadn't caught any fish. And the disciples didn't sit around whining, why didn't I catch some fish? Why did this happen to me? I'm just not a very good fisherman. I think I'm just going to quit. That would have been a waste of time. Did you catch any fish? No. Cast your net on the other side of the boat. Change your method. Listen, if things are not working for you the way they are, change your method. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. And some of you getting what you got till you've had enough of what you got. How far is it from an empty net to a full net? How far is it to the miracle that you need in your life? Would you like to know how far it is? It's about 18 inches. The distance from your head to your heart and from your knee to the floor. When you can put your knee on the floor and say in your heart, God, I need help. I don't have anywhere else to turn. You're on the verge of a miracle. If you're not saved, I'll give you a classic example. If you're not saved, the moment you make the decision and say, yes, I receive Jesus Christ as my Lord and my Savior, the greatest miracle known to man takes place. That's the miracle of the new birth. Miracle of salvation, being born again. That's the greatest miracle of all. How God could take a sinner like me and forgive him and save him and change his life and put something in him to make him want to help some other people. That's a miracle. Because you didn't know me. That's why I don't talk about my past. Some preachers made a living talking about how bad they were. I was bad enough to where I don't want anybody to know how bad I was. Good grief, that's the empty net. When you say, God, I need help, I can't make it on my own. I'm just tired of fighting. I'm worn out. I'm exhausted. I'm discouraged. God, you see my heart. I need help with my marriage. I need help with my kids. I need help with my finances. God, I need a job. And then you begin to trust him and look, knock, seek, ask, turn to him, and then you start doing your part. You're on the verge of a miracle. Now see, Jesus didn't fill their boat with fish. They had to put the net down. They had to drag the net in. You've got to make your own effort. This is a whole lot better preaching than the response I'm getting. Some of you may be down, but you're not out. Your net may be empty, but there's a full net on the other side of the boat. When everybody else is saying you're down and you're out, that's the time for you to get up and look for your full net. I'm asking God for some full nets today. I'm asking God for the miracles that you need in your life to begin to take place. How many have had some empty nets? How many have been down and discouraged? How many have been just on the verge of giving up? Just saying, what's the use? Heck with it. Chuck it all. How many know what I'm talking about? I am in the right place.
Yes, you are.
Jesus always shows up where there's a need. He showed up here today. I believe there's some full nets waiting for you. Now, if you're not saved, get saved. Start at the beginning. What's the point? If you don't, what's the beginning? In the beginning was God. If you're going to start at the beginning. Start with God. Be sure you have Jesus Christ in your life. Start at the beginning. If you're not saved, get saved. If you're backslidden, say, I'm backslidden and I'm getting myself right today. You need to rededicate your life, then do it. If there's an empty net in your marriage, put yourself into building your marriage. Most of you know me well enough to know I won't catch your fish for you. I won't do everything for you. I'll teach you how to do it. But you better learn to minister to yourself and to each other. Don't expect me to do it for you. I won't do it. I will not. I will not. I will teach you how to do it, but I won't do it for you. You need to understand that going in. I'll love you. I'll teach you. I'll build you up. I'll encourage you, and I will discipline you if I have to. But I'll do it in love. Because I do love you.